Here's another audio download from the Richard and Judy Book Club.
I suppose it's an odd question for me to ask you after all this time, but seriously, on reflection, why do you think we, as in people, read fiction?
Well, answering for myself, I would say that there are at least two reasons, and probably more. The first one is that it's a kind of roadmap for life. That, we all have our own philosophical questions about life, our emotional questions about life. What does death mean? What does love mean? All that kind of stuff. And reading, from the classics onwards, teaches us about all that. It teaches us about how other people, quintessentially other people exactly like us, only more talented, who answer these questions, and therefore we can look to them for advice and a map. The other one is, the other one is for me, to stimulate the imagination. I mean, I just love getting lost. I love getting lost in a book. More than a film, more than anything on television, I just love getting lost in a book because it lasts for so long. It kind of fills your entire head, and it can completely takes you out of your normal, everyday, day-to-day life.
Yes, I mean, I'd agree very much with that last part. It allows you to experience things in your head, which actually, after a while, with a really good book, is the same almost as experiencing them in reality, that otherwise you'd never get a chance to do. So, for example, one of the books that I reread over the summer was The Martian. And by, chapter 2, chapter 3, I was on the Red Planet. And I was him, and I was going through an experience that, of course, I will never come within a million miles, literally, of going through. And yet, in reading that book, along with many other readers, I went through that extraordinary, unattainable experience, kind of for real. So it's a strange way of tricking the brain into thinking that that you, one, is experiencing something which actually you never ever will. I think that probably does it.
Welcome back to the Richard and Judy Book Club download, exclusive to WHSmith.
Hi, I'm Gregg Hurwitz, here to talk about Orphan X. He has been in the car only 5 minutes. The leather smells expensive. The driver is given his name, Jack Johns, but nothing else. An old guy, at least 50-something, with a wide, handsome face. He's built square like a catcher and has a baseball squint to match. Jack tugs a handkerchief from his rear pant pocket, fluffs it out, and offers it across the console. For your cheek. Evan looks at the fine linen. The blood will stain it. Jack's face registers amusement. It's okay. Evan wipes his face. He was the smallest of the kids, the last one picked for sports. It was only through a savage set of challenges that he found his way into this seat, that he'd managed to get himself chosen. Evan has been taken out of circulation as surely as if he'd been zapped off the streets by a flying saucer. Trial by fire, yes, or recruitment of some sort. But for what? Evan still has no idea. All he knows is wherever he's heading now has to be better than what's behind him in East Baltimore.
I think as far as Orphan X goes, if you're looking for grit, a really, really gritty storyline from page 1 to the end, this is the place to come. It doesn't get much grittier than this. I mean, I think I wrote something like, when I was doing the review for this particular book, take Jason Bourne and Jack Reacher, put them in a blender, add 3 drops of neat sulfuric acid and 2 of nitroglycerin, switch it on, and don't be surprised if the lid blows off, because congratulations, you've just mixed your first Orphan X. As a woman, did you find it as sort of satisfyingly dramatic and physical?
Yeah, I mean, I love thrillers and I love mysteries and I love all that kind of stuff. I mean, I love Lee Child and Jack Reacher, especially, very, very much. And this has strong elements. Orphan X has strong elements of that. Also, as a woman, I think it always helps that the villain, if you like, is he's not really a villain. The villain is a hero, in other words, that the protagonist of the book is capable of being very, very bad. He's trained in ways to kill people. He's trained in ways to eliminate people. But this particular guy only eliminates the baddies, which is always, always hugely appealing, I think, especially to women. And also the fact that Orphan X, well, he genuinely was an orphan. Evan Smoke, he was recruited as an orphan by some weird American program to try and get orphans with no other ties to train them as being sort of good stroke bad guys. And the fact that he was an orphan makes you kind of love him and want him to succeed. It makes you want to cheer him on.
But it's not entirely cold-blooded, this intriguing premise. As you say, the government says it has to take some kind of shortcut to bringing justice, you know, to the bad guys. But the handler who trains Orphan X in these dark arts, they don't get any darker, he doesn't just do that. He somehow manages to make him stay in touch with the human being that he is, with his humanity.
He kind of doesn't destroy love. In fact, he encourages love.
But he becomes a sort of weird hybrid. He becomes a killer with a conscience.
Well, usually when I'm on a project, I've collated lots of notes, and I have two very big monitors on my desk. And one of them is all the notes, and the other one is the actual book itself. And the notes form, I suppose you could call it an outline, but it's much more of a mess than that. And as I'm writing forward with the manuscript, I'm also tinkering with the outline that's always evolving on the other screen. So if I think of things I want to foreshadow or change, I'm always developing the story. It's not like I have a set locked outline which I fill in. If I were to do that, I think I would get bored. And the process of writing a book is really the process of one document on one monitor shrinking and the one on the other monitor growing until at the end of it, one of the monitors is blank and the other one has 400 pages of a book. Well, it's always really moving to hear from readers and to hear people in conversation and the different things that they connect to with the book. I mean, I think I was such a fanatical reader growing up. I was not allowed to watch television growing up. That was in my household. So I was only allowed to watch Alfred Hitchcock movies, which explains like 90% of my personality. So I went to the library twice a week, and there's so many books that for me were so moving and influential in my life that whenever I catch even a flicker of that somebody and one of my readers is connected to something, or that a book has entertained them or meant something in their life, it's the biggest pleasure for me, because that was the most important thing, moving thing for me. So, you know, I love to hear from readers, and I love getting the input about the books and how they impact people. The Richard and Judy Book Club is my favorite book club. Like, it's the best. I love that I was asked back a second time. It feels like a huge honor. I love what they do for reading. It's probably my favorite accolade that I've gotten in my career. So to be back again with Orphan X just means a lot to me. Well, the most important thing is to get your butt in the chair time. It's just about sitting down and doing it. So living in Los Angeles, one of the things I often say is I meet so many people who want to be writers, but I meet far fewer who actually want to write. And you have to love the actual writing itself. That has to be the thing that drives you. And, you know, it's like a muscle. You have to work it out. So for young writers, I often suggest working 2 hours a day, you know, or 2 hours twice a week, just getting some interval down that you're exercising and getting better. And the other thing is, don't be afraid to put things down. I mean, I always talk about the first draft I call the vomit draft, where you're just getting everything down. I mean, it's been said before that you can't fix a blank page. Don't be afraid to put something down that is mediocre or doesn't work, because once it's down, you can fix it. But if you're afraid to set it down, you're not going to get anywhere. Well, I think that narrative is selected for, types of stories are selected for from an evolutionary perspective, as much as opposable thumbs and eyelids. Like, I think that stories, you know, you can find a tribe that's been isolated from all the rest of humanity in the Amazon, and they will have an archetypal hero story. And it's because these stories convey to us essential ways that we have to evolve to live in the world. They teach us how to deal with the unknown, both externally and internally, and provide guidance and lessons. I think they're an essential part of human nature, is our ability to think in stories. And, you know, some of us are odd enough to want to do that for a living professionally, and to just sort of live inside these books and stories and refine them that way. But I think it's something that's just a fundamental aspect of the human experience. It's very hard to turn off my brain or be looking and assessing everything for its potential to fit into one of the 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 stories or plots that I'm working on in different mediums. It's very tough. Someone much brighter than I once said that being a writer is having homework for the rest of your life, and it certainly feels that way. It's there's never a time that something won't happen that the back of my head won't say, oh, I gotta grab that line of dialogue or that image that just occurred to me or that thing that person said or this telling little detail that I see about somebody that offers us insight into who they might be. And so it's constantly going. And so it takes me out of the present a lot in ways that I have to work on. And so one of the things that's really helpful for me is to do something physical at the end of a work day. Go for a walk, go to the gym, play football. And that tends to help to get me out of my brain and back into my body. Or bourbon.
Well, Gregg, which came first, the idea for the story or the central character?
It's hard to differentiate sometimes which is going to come first, a character or a story. And I think I know that I have the mileage for a book to go the distance when I have the right character collide with a plot. And so in this case, I talked to a lot of friends who were Navy SEALs and Army Rangers and former CIA who talked to me about Black Ops in the US government. But it was only when this notion of the orphan program occurred to me, where they would take these kids out of foster homes and bring them up as assassins, that I knew that I had something that was special here. And so for me, it's sort of an Evan, this character who was raised with his moral compass not broken, who was raised by a handler who was kind and decent and tried to keep his sense of humanity intact. As Jack tells him in the book, he says, the hard part isn't making you an assassin. The hard part is keeping you human. And once I thought about that assassin who's a kid who was raised and trained to do one thing and never knew different, but had his moral compass intact, colliding with this sort of story, I knew that I had someone special enough for me to stay with, not just this book and this year, but next year and for the next book and the book after that.
I guess you'd get no time to sleep because you seem to be writing sort of 24/7. I mean, you write all these bestsellers, you write for the screen, as in TV and film and comics. I think Wolverine and Batman's in your oeuvre. So how on earth did you find time to write Orphan X?
Well, one of the problems I've always had is that I have a difficult time saying no to things that seem like they'll be a lot of fun, which made me a very difficult teenager to parent, I would imagine. But part of this is I love books, and books for me were first and foremost. They formed the spine of my career, and that's always going to be sort of my center lane. But as these other opportunities come up, to have a movie made, to be able to write Batman for DC Comics, there's just no conceivable way that I can say no to that. It's just too much fun. I'd rather go without sleep, as you imply. And the other thing is I find that working on multiple projects is actually really helpful. To go from a novel to a screenplay. I'm adapting the screenplay right now for Orphan X for Bradley Cooper at Warner Brothers. And to go from that into a comic and to go from that into a television pilot. One of the things that I find is it's sort of a palate cleanser that gives me more energy to return to the other projects. And the other thing that I find is that when these other projects are simmering on a back burner, I can really come back to them rejuvenated. And a lot of times they've done a lot of cooking back there on their own. So when it's time for me to come back and sit down and make headway, I'm usually pretty ready to go. And so there's a sort of efficiency that happens when I'm working on multiple projects at the same time than when I have all the time in the world to focus on one.
Which are your favourite thriller writers? I read somewhere that you are incredibly keen on Stephen King, which I couldn't agree with more.
Well, I became a writer because of how much I love reading. And I'm always baffled by these writers who say they can't read anyone else when they're writing because they're worried that their tone would infect their own writing. And I just can't imagine going without reading that long. I have so many favorites. I love Dennis Lehane. I love Megan Abbott. I mean, you rightly point to Stephen King, who is a huge inspiration for me growing up. I mean, I still remember, reading his books under the covers with a flashlight, scared to death. I was 27. No, when I was a kid in fifth grade, and my parents were out at dinner. I remember reading Salem's Lot, and that was the most terrifying thing that I'd ever read. And he was really the one that when I was reading his books that I thought, I can't believe someone can do this. Someone can put words that we know down in a particular order on the page and create this unbelievable emotional reaction in somebody else, miles and years away sometimes. And so I just love the way that he writes and the way that he captures things and his ability to just scare the hell out of me when I was younger. And so he was a very big inspiration to me. There's more writers who I read and admire now than I could probably list.
Well, in the, I suppose, 3 hours available to you next year to write another novel, what do you think you'll be doing?
Well, I'm really excited to get back to Evan Smoke again. And, it took me a lot of years to get to this character. I'm known mostly for writing standalones, and it was, decades of research and writing to bring me to the verge of writing Orphan X, and finally knowing that I had a character that I could live with in a series, the way that some other series that I love where writers manage to keep it fresh. Like I love Lee Child series, Robert Kreis, Michael Connelly. And it took me so long to get to and really find and connect to the heart of this character in Evan Smoke that I can't wait to present the sequel to everyone, which will be called The Nowhere Man, and that'll be out next year.
Join us again to meet another author and get another suggestion or two about a good book to read next.
Even if you know in your heart of hearts,
Yes.
you're still saying to yourself, no, it can't possibly be. And I used a thing in the book where she's Jean and Jeannie, where Jeannie is the little woman at home and Jean is the woman who is examining all the possibilities.
Thanks for listening. We'll be back soon.
Richard and Judy recommending great books for you, exclusive to WHSmith.